Hi everyone, I'd like to use this video to help explain to you how you can go too hard in many of your workouts, and this example is even in one of the very hardest workouts. So I'm going to use VO2 max training as an example. Doesn't matter whether you do it as a running session or a bike session. I'm going to use the graph behind me, which doesn't show up too well on this angle, but I'll use it with a close-up in a second to explain to you why you can go too hard even on the hardest workouts. I want you to consider that we're doing a VO2 max workout. Let's say this is 5 by 3 minutes that we've got here on the chart. We've got time along the bottom. We've got your intervals as they would show here across the top. So let's say we were basing them on pace and on power. We've got here the target. So this might be your target pace or your target power. Now it can be too easy to go a little bit too hard at the beginning. You're fresh, you're motivated, you want to smash the session, and obviously you've been led to believe that more is better. So on interval number 1, you go a little bit too hard. You recover quite well, so on interval number 2, you go a little bit too hard again, and then reality bites. From there on in, it's a struggle. You don't quite hit the required power or the required pace on number 3. Maybe even a little bit more of a struggle on number 4, which is often no man's land because you're really suffering, but you're not quite close enough to the end of the session to give it your absolute all. And then for the 5th rep, sometimes people can bring it back and can really push to that true 100% effort because they know it's the very last repetition. But here we've got a similar power output or a similar pace, somebody that's struggling. So here, a little bit overzealous at the beginning. Still a very tough workout. These final three efforts would feel, as far as perceived effort is concerned, almost like 100%, even though the power and the pace has fallen a little bit. So you could still perhaps view that as a good workout, but here's the crucial point when you're doing VO2 max in particular. The good stuff happens when you get to about 95% of your maximum heart rate. Okay, so that's way above threshold. Threshold normally sits about 90% of your maximal heart rate. So we're going, in the region of 10 beats above that or so. Now, what happens on interval number 1, no matter how hard you work, is quite often heart rate lags and you don't perhaps get up to the desired level in repetition number 1. So that's a given that even though we were working above VO2 max in terms of power and pace, as far as heart rate and our systemic stress is concerned, we perhaps didn't even reach VO2 max within the first 3 minutes of this example. So on rep number 2, we held good power again, or perhaps a bit too much power, and we got the heart rate response that we wanted. We hit 95% of maximum heart rate. Obviously, we eased off at that point as we recovered. Going into intervals 3, 4, and 5, obviously power drops. Now, when power drops, heart rate doesn't need to come up. Heart rate is, heart is a slave to the muscles. When the muscles call for oxygen and all the other good stuff, then heart rate responds to that. So here, we likely see a reduction in heart rate for intervals 3, 4, and 5, simply because although we're trying very, very hard, we're not hitting the desired pace or power, and therefore heart rate doesn't have to come up. So it would still feel like a very, very tough workout. But here, when we want to train VO2 max, we need to maximize this here. We need to maximize this time where we're working around about 95% of our heart rate max. Okay, so the learning points from this would be obviously to be a little bit more cautious at the beginning. It's likely here that this athlete would have utilized almost all of the anaerobic energy to supply the additional energy above FTP. But they haven't recovered enough. Those anaerobic energy stores wouldn't have been replenished sufficiently by number 3. Now, had we have taken these just below the line or just on the line and been a little bit more cautious, we might then have held a better response as far as power is concerned, and therefore we should have seen a heart rate that was more likely hitting that 95%, that real target value, all the way through the workout. So while it's okay to be a little stronger on rep number 1, we want to be as even as possible throughout the workout. So that's just one example of how you can go too hard even on some of the very hardest workouts we do as triathletes.